Hey everyone, it's Zeffy and welcome back to the channel. So patch 1.1 is just around the corner. In fact, when this video actually goes live, it'll probably be out in about a few hours time when the maintenance is over. And with patch 1.1, we are getting a multitude of new things, but the two new things that we're getting that are really good are the two new units, Yui and Marian. So today, as you can see, I am on my Taiwan account. I actually don't have Yui on this account, but I do have Marian on this account. And today I'm just going to be going through their skill sets, what they exactly do, sort of, brief team comp variations and what you should be looking for in the team with them. I'll touch a little bit on revelation cards, but that's probably not too important at this stage in the game. I'll also go over their weapons. And most importantly, I'll go over should you pull for these particular characters and reasoning and stuff behind them. In the background, I'll show some B-roll when I'm doing some SOS trials on the Taiwan account. So get ready for a very informative video. Alright, before this video actually begins, definitely don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. We finally hit 10,000 subscribers, guys. That is super exciting, and I'm very appreciative of all the support recently on Persona 5 Phantom X. It truly means a lot, and onwards and upwards to 15k maybe. And don't forget to join the Gacha Rebels Discord, link in the description. Alright, so let's go quickly talk about the two characters. So I will start off with Yui. So Yui is a single target electric DPS unit. Her persona is known as Absuades. And to be honest, I think Yui's design is pretty cool. She's got like this little tech game vibe type of thing, which I mean, if you've experienced the synergy, you'll know exactly what's up. Now, Yui's very interesting because Yui's actually sort of specializing in follow-up attacks and being able to follow up on when your teammates actually attack. So if we actually look over her skills very quickly, so Electric Bomb is just basically a single target damage dealing ability, 121% ratio of attack. If the foe is not inflicted with shock, there is a 44.8% chance to be inflicted with shock. And shock is basically what you want as the element on the enemies, because when you inflict them with shock, if the foe is inflicted, increases damage by 30%. So that's why you want to build a team around Yui that can do a lot of shock damage. So that includes Wanda's personas. Closer, for example, is a very good example. I'll get to that in the team section. But you just want to apply shock as much as possible because you get a 30% damage increase with Yui if that occurs. Now, to follow up with that, her skill 2 is basically just an AoE multi-target sort of a DPS ability. So 39.1%, not that great of a ratio to electric damage to all foes, but it does increase main damage to the main target by 25%. And obviously, you also proc the additional shock boost damage if the enemies are shocked. So skill 3 is where her follow-ups sort of lie and where her follow-ups come from. So you increase your own attack by 25%, so it's just basically a self-buff, which is really nice. And you also select one ally to be your player 2, but I believe it's called Playmate or something like that. But anyway, in this translation, it's player 2. Triggers a follow-up after player 2 deals damage with the persona skill. And makes your next 2 follow-ups deal an additional 87.2% attack electric damage for 2 turns. So that's just basically 2 follow-ups like after. And again, this is basically sort of the bread and butter with the follow-ups. So essentially, after that Playmate actually does an attack, you will always follow up for 2 turns. And then this is where your sort of big sort of damage and everything comes from. It's basically skill 3 as well as your highlight. So your highlight, you increase your own attack damage again, and then you also increase your own follow-up attack damage. However, you will actually trigger a follow-up after anyone on your team actually makes a turn with, well, deals damage with a persona skill essentially for 1 turn. So in 1 turn, basically, if you use this highlight and then you get a full set of rotations, basically Yui will follow up on every single set of rotations, which is actually not that bad if I'm being completely honest. And Yui can actually do a lot of damage. Now these actually synergize very well with the passives. So when you follow up, you deal 12% additional damage to enemies that are inflicted by shock. And then here, let's go together. When basically your playmate is present, you increase your own crit rate and attack by 4%. And basically the opponents, or not the opponents, the playmates attack by 4% as well. So overall, the kit is basically built around essentially, dealing shock or applying shock. And then essentially you just get all these attack buffs that you get, and also making sure that you have a playmate all the time so you can deal more follow-ups. The only thing with Yui that I will say is a caveat, and I'll explain a bit more in the should you pull section, but basically the follow-ups is a little bit inconsistent because obviously to get massive damage, you'll need the highlight. And not necessarily, you'll be able to get the highlight sort of in a really quick fashion, for example. There's obviously other ways around that. And there's also applying, using a skill or using a turn to actually apply your playmate buff to actually increase the number of turns, or at least the number of follow-ups that Yui actually gets. So it could be a little bit inconsistent, but in terms of the overall damage kit, I mean, these ratios are not too bad, especially because if you do inflict with shock, which there are plenty of ways of doing with, again, Wonders Personas and Closer, for example, then you will be dishing out quite a lot of electric damage. And what my assumption is the next SOS, as well as the next guild battles, for example, there will be some sort of electric affinity in there. So, just be prepared for that, I guess. But in overall, not too bad of a single target DPS. But obviously with the skill 2, you can actually do electric damage to everyone. So as I mentioned before, I'll just briefly touch on sort of Yui's team comps or potential team comps. So basically what you want is a shock applier, and the only real shock applier that we currently have at the moment is actually Closer. So Closer will actually synergize perfectly well with Yui, and Closer is probably one of the best in slots, is the best in slot for Yui at this stage, just because basically, you can apply shock on basically every single one of Closer's skills essentially, and even doing that, you can actually increase Closer's additional damage as well. And Closer is an AoE DPS, which pairs perfectly with a single target DPS like Yui. And then basically all you really want is just a buffer or a support type character, like a buffer, debuffer, for example. So I don't think we're going to get Vino yet, but Vino will come out very soon. Perfect debuffer for the team. But at this stage in 1.0, in terms of global, you could use someone like Soy, for example. Soy is very good to keep you alive. So a great sort of buffing unit, def down on skill 2 and all the great stuff that Soy comes with. And then later down the track, as I mentioned before, with the highlights and stuff like that, Cord would be perfect for Yui as well. And Cord will be coming in 2.0, I believe, anyway. So basically, Cord would be perfect for Yui just because Cord can actually increase highlight damage as well as it just increase and give you an extra instance of highlight anyway. So you get like 2 highlights essentially, which basically makes Yui like pretty much able to follow up on every person's attack for basically 2 turns instead of 1, which overall increases her DPS. Alright, so revelation cards for Yui. So I'm not going to touch on this too much, considering first of all I don't actually have the cards and I can't actually show you the best sort of in-slot cards. But basically what you're looking for is you're looking for the growth card. I don't know which one is the growth card. I have to look at the images. So for the space card or for the universe card, you want the growth card. And you're looking for, your typical single target DPS, so your crit rate, crit damage, damage bonus, and attack. Obviously, damage bonus is a little bit weird translation. It's like attack multiplier or something like that, but that's what you're looking for, crit and attack basically boosts for substats. And then your revelation card sets, you're looking for the 4-piece change set. And basically, again, looking for damage bonus, crit damage, any attack percent for your main stats, and your substats will be essentially the same thing as well. Alright, briefly touching on weapons. Again, because I don't have Yui, I am unable to actually show the weapons. But essentially, Yui's 4-star and 5-star weapons are very, very good. Obviously, the 5-star equivalent is better, but you do not have to pull for the 5-star weapon, in my personal opinion. You do increase your crit rate, damage dealt for follow-ups as well, which is obviously part of Yui's kit, so that's why it's really, really good. But the issue with Yui's 5-star weapon is that to trigger basically the maximum amount of potential follow-up damage dealt, I think, which is like 43%, which is quite a lot as well, is that it only really triggers after an electric skill. So you just need to make sure that you do have paired with an electric or shock applier in order to maximize the damage that Yui can do. Now the 4-star variant, it's pretty much the same thing. You get crit rate instead of, you only get crit rate. You don't get any crit damage, but you do increase your electric damage as well, which could be good enough as well. Because I guess if you'll be pairing it with the electric skill anyway, but in terms of follow-up, you may not always follow up with an electric skill, for example, so you are missing out a little bit of the damage. So to spend sort of premium currency on, the 5-star weapon, you could probably save that up from maybe Marian's weapon, for example, or just a different weapon in general. But the weapons are perfectly fine. The 4-star variant or the 4-star signature is more than okay as well. Alright, we are moving on to everyone's favorite nurse, and that is Marian, also known as Minami, and I'm sure you've done the side quests with Minami and synergies and stuff like that as well. She gives you lots of gifts. But Nami is basically a 5-star bless sustain unit, and is probably the best sustain unit or the most consistent sustain unit in the game, because she actually gives you regenerating health. And what I mean by that is basically every single turn you get HP back. So in terms of like an overall sustain unit, just really, really good. And plus, you know, she does bless damage, and at this point in time, we don't really have many characters to do bless damage. So in terms of like weakness, infinity and stuff like that, it's always good to I guess build and have Marian. So not just her sustain capabilities as well, by the way, I'll go over the skills quickly. So you got Nurse's Light as skill 1, so deal 42% max HP bless damage to one foe and give all allies a stack of blessing, which is basically restore 1% max HP for 2 turns, which is essentially what I was saying before. And you also gain 1 stack of Diagnosis, and each stack increases max HP by 50%, which is really, really good. And you can spend these Diagnosis points to basically give Gift of Spring, which essentially buffs to your team. So moving on to skill 2, restore 50% max HP and plus flat rate of 822 to one ally, and get one other lowest HP ally as well, and you can dispel 2 debuffs, which is going to be super, super, super good. Pro tip in the next boss battle, a bit of a spoiler though actually, but it's going to be super, super good. And basically, essentially, she just becomes an all-round great sustain unit because you can now debuff, you can dispel 2 debuffs on your allies, and you're also essentially healing 2. I believe this gets upgraded with your awarenesses as well. I think at like A3 or something. Yeah, so at A3, you can actually restore another ally. So you're essentially restoring your main target, secondary target, and third target with all these heals. And all of these are getting blessing stacks, which then, you know, increase sort of regenerative health as well. So, you know, you're just doing a lot of healing very, very quickly. You're also dispelling debuffs. You're also getting 1 stack of Diagnosis as well, which is really, really nice as well. So you can see how Marian sort of fits into the landscape in terms of being overall really, really good, you know, sustain unit, as well as just buffing as well. And then on skill 3 is essentially where everything sort of like ties together. So spend all Diagnosis and immediately restore 13.6% max HP. I believe actually these Diagnosis points are actually like, I think they're also called Nectar. Because I think this translation, because I remember playing Marian, I think these are called Nectar. But anyway, I'm just going to go with the translation here. And immediately restore 30.6% max HP to the main target and restore the same amount to the ally with the lowest HP 2 times. Repeat this 1 time with each stack of Diagnosis spent. And then increase all allies max HP by 75%, max HP up to blah, blah, blah. And you can, with each stack of Diagnosis spent, to increase basically the max health. And essentially when you spend these Diagnosis points, or we spend these nectars, which is essentially on skill 3, you also give Gift of Spring, which essentially is basically just an attack buff as well. So then with, you know, synergizing with the passives, increased damage of heal target by 15%, which is actually a lot if you think about it. 15% plus 3% of all max blessing stacks up to 30%. You can basically increase everyone's damage by 30%. Which is insane actually for a sustain unit for 1 turn. But again, you can always reapply those Diagnosis and blessing stacks. And then Peace of Mind at the start of battle increases all allies max HP by 10% up to 1500 based on obviously Marian's max HP. So overall, you come in, you get max HP increase immediately. You can essentially just set up with, you know, getting blessing stacks as well as getting nectar or Diagnosis points essentially. And then what you want to do is to build up those nectar stacks with skill 1 and skill 2. And then at skill 3, use up all the nectar stacks essentially. And then just do, you know, increase healing, apply, you know, proc sort of Gift of Spring, as well as, you know, the health comes first as well, increasing the damage per blessing stack as well. And then Thief Tactics, before, I don't think I actually mentioned that before, you basically restore a large chunk of HP. You can dispel 1 debuff and gain additional max HP on that main target. And then also the follow-up turn as well with regenerative health, you actually restore 4.8% max HP plus 133 after 1 turn action. So overall, you can see sort of how Marian fits into the landscape. Marian is just super, super good. So essentially what you want to do is you want to increase your Diagnosis or nectar stacks as well as your bless stacks on your teammates with skill 1 and skill 2. And then essentially when you have a lot of these, then you want to do skill 3 for massive healing. And then while you're doing all this, getting blessing stacks, you get increased damage, and then, you know, you get your peace of mind, and, you know, you get your health increase essentially. And then also you can, you know, dispel as well. So whenever you need to do all that sort of stuff, it's perfectly fine. Dispel, heal, buff. She does essentially now that I'm actually reading it properly, like she does essentially everything. So it's actually quite amazing. All right, so I'm going to go over quickly Team Comps. So Team Comps is very flexible because, again, she is a sustain unit. So essentially, you can slot her into anything. So anything that
previously used Morgana, you can probably slot in Minami, and 9 times out of 10 will probably be actually just better than Morgana. Lufel is a little bit, you know, niche in that respect, because if you're slotting into the fire team, then Lufel's obviously got to be slightly better. But with the attack buffs that Marian gives with per blessing stack up to 30% increase, basically overall you have a buffing unit now, so you don't necessarily need Riddle and or Moko. I'm sure they have their places in their teams as well, but now you have that, but you also have the sustain component. So making all those, I guess, especially in the first 2 weeks of like SOS and guild battles, for example, Minami will basically slot into any one of those teams and probably like take your score up to the next level essentially. So she can basically slot into any single team. So I will quickly touch on the revelation cards. So again, with the recommended sets, you know, I don't think I have any of the recommended sets, but essentially what you want is actually, I don't think this is the best in slot set. Yeah, I don't think this is actually the best in slot set, but essentially what you want to do is you want to increase your healing effect with Marian as well. But you can also slot in, for example, Departure Universe card with 4-piece sovereignty, but you also throw in there, the Trust Universe card with 4-piece affluence, for example, and they'll each give sort of different buffs. Either or will be perfectly fine. But basically what you want as your main stats, and then building towards your substats, is essentially HP %, and then you do want a little bit of SP % recovery in there, just because SP recovery, Minami might run into SP issues sort of, you know, in prolonged fights just with the amount of skills that she is using. So you want to build a little bit towards that, but mostly again HP %, just because, you know, everything scales off max HP for Marian skills and everything like that. So I will briefly touch on weapons as well. So as you can see, I don't have the 5-star weapon for Marian, but I do have the 4-star equivalent. And basically these weapons essentially do the same thing, and it's pretty much the same as Yui's sort of situation, where the 5-star is obviously better, but the 4-star can still do work. So for the 5-star, I've got it up here. So it increases max HP, which is great, because again, more HP basically means more output from Marian. Increases the healing effect by 10%, 10 to 19% per stack of nectar, I think up to like 19% of diagnosis. And when consuming diagnosis, you increase all allies damage dealt by 49%, which is essentially more than that passive cap as well. Actually, the passive cap is a blessing. So when you actually have the 5-star weapon, you increase damage more as well. So you got increased damage on your blessing stacks, and you got increased damage on your diagnosis spent and nectar spent as well. Now the 4-star equivalent, as you can see here, it just increases the healing effect, which is good. Increases continuous healing, which is all the regenerative healing on skill 2, for example, as well as, you know, passives and stuff on your highlights. Increases it by 28.5%, which is again a really, really big buff. And then after using a healing skill, you have 26% chance to grant blessing to the main target, which is essentially more blessing stacks, and more blessing stacks with that passive as well means more damage. So you are missing out on the nectar spent sort of damage increase. So if I'm tossing between sort of pulling for Marian's weapon as well as pulling for Yui's weapon, for example, then in my opinion, obviously Marian's weapon will be better, because you are pretty much guaranteed to always spend nectar stacks, which means you are pretty much guaranteed to have that buff up all the time. Whereas on Yui's weapon, for example, it's just a little bit like, you know, you need to have an electric follow-up, and that might not always occur. So the inconsistency with the follow-ups might be a little bit, you know, inconsistent essentially. But Marian's weapon, 4-star, 5-star, either one, you know, they're not must pulls or anything like that, but you do increase the buffs that Marian gives with the 5-star weapon. So the next part will be essentially, do I think you should pull for Yui and or Marian? And I will have B-roll in the background here of just some gameplay of SOS using Marian. Again, I don't have Yui on Taiwan, but I do have Marian. So in my personal opinion, again, like with any sort of pulling or whatever, regardless, just pull for whoever you want to. Both characters are really, really good. Now, I will say Yui, for example, is single target and is very, very locked into electric teams that can apply shock. Eventually, you will get caught, and eventually Yui will actually become really, really good with the team of Closer and Cord, for example. However, again, single target, and again, locked into the shock-based sort of systems and stuff like that. So it really depends on what you're sort of looking for in a team, essentially. Personally, will I be pulling for Marian? I think I'll probably save up my pulls. And if you're a free-to-play player, then I probably recommend the same. But again, judging by the output and the skills list and everything that I mentioned with Yui before, Yui is still a very, very good character, but you definitely need to pair Yui with Closer 100%. So if you don't really like Closer, don't want to build Closer just for a specific character, then I probably wouldn't recommend
pulling for Yui. Yui's 5-star weapon I also wouldn't necessarily recommend pulling, especially if you want to save for other units, for example, because in my opinion there are just better units out there anyway in regards to like single target and stuff like that. Yui is unique that I believe Yui is actually the only one that actually has any sort of additional follow-ups, which is really, really cool. So if you sort of like that playstyle as well, I guess similar to like HSR follow-up teams or whatever like that, then yeah, Yui will be perfect for you. Overall, Yui is not too bad at all. Like, I don't think she's bad whatsoever, but personally I wouldn't be pulling for her, and personally I also wouldn't be pulling for her 5-star weapon. Now, Marian on the other hand. Now, Marian is 100% one of those pulls where I feel like you need to pull her just for the amount of just stuff that she does. She can dispel, she can buff, she can heal, she can regenerate the heal. She does a lot of healing output. She's essentially all those buffing characters in 1.0, like Moko, Riddle, and as well as like the output of Morgana into one character. In that regard, she does sound like a must pull, but you have to remember that Marian's also a standard banner character. So how this will work is that at 1.0, you will be getting Marian and Yui on separate banners, and they will be costing premium currency, I would assume. Now, Yui is a limited banner character, which means Yui will never go to standard, which means Yui will always rerun on the limited banner, costing limited or premium currency. Marian, on the other hand, moves to the standard banner, which means that you can actually spend your standard banner tickets on, or the gold tickets on the standard banner in the chance of getting Marian. Now, obviously that's a chance because it's a pool of 5 stars that you can potentially get. So you may or may not actually be able to get Marian. If you get really, really unlucky, for example, then you could potentially never get Marian. So if you want to guarantee Marian, then I do believe she is worth the premium currency, but it's all completely up to you. If you have a fully built Lufel, a fully built Morgana, for example, then do you necessarily need Marian? No, you don't necessarily need Marian. But is Marian going to be an absolute crack sustain unit and probably going to be slotted into every single team that you have? Definitely yes. So in that regard, from my personal opinion, I probably will pull for Marian because I've gotten absolutely shit luck ever since getting Rin on my first 10 pull. I've just been getting really, really bad luck on the gold ticket and standard banner ticket system. So I think I will try and guarantee myself Marian. And then that way I have basically, you know, 3 super good sustain units that I can basically slot into pretty much any team. Lufel for like a fire team, for example, and Marian pretty much for everything else. Sorry, Morgana. But again, if you don't have Marian and this doesn't, you know, this doesn't go back on what I said before, Morgana is still a very, very good sustain unit. So if you don't want to use your premium currency and want to roll the dice on your gold tickets for Marian, definitely do that. Morgana will do just fine into 1.1. Don't worry about, you know, that you invested into a sustain unit that Marian is just basically, you know, quote unquote power creeps. You can still use Morgana just fine. You know, basically if you're in the top 1% SOS and guild battles this season, it's not like that's going to change anytime soon, if I'm being completely honest. So, yeah, just pull for whoever you want. I probably will, just to guarantee Marian, but you can also just wait for Marian on a standard banner if you want to save your premium currency. She's not a must pull in any sort of sense, in my personal opinion. But if you do listen to this video and or watch this video and basically see like, oh, Marian's a really, really good sustain unit, basically does everything that I need, then go for it, pull for Marian on premium currency. I don't think you will be disappointed. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the video. Thanks for joining me in this lovely night on Shibuya in Persona 5 the Phantom X. So this is a little bit of a long-winded video, I realized that, but I will have timestamps in the description. But essentially, I just wanted to go through and point out basically the strengths and weaknesses of each unit, and why I think they are, you know, that you should be pulling for, and why I think they're actually good. And that's why it's a little bit of a longer video. I just want to give you guys as much information as possible. Just do not forget that you should pull for whoever you want. Don't let me or anyone else influence your decisions. If you like the characters, definitely go pull for them. There's no right or wrong, in all honesty. Like, you can talk about tier list, endgame, top 1% players, for example. But at the end of the day, if you enjoyed the game, that's the most important thing. And if you don't enjoy the game, then you're just not going to play anyway, so it doesn't really fucking matter, right? So if you do enjoy this video, definitely don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Definitely helps out the channel a bunch. And I really, really appreciate all the support up to 10,000. Let's go and push for 15,000 by the end of the year, guys. I know we can do it. So thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video.